Hello and welcome to the Play It Forward podcast presented by PeacePlayers, the podcast where we lift up voices and stories of people working in their communities and networks to promote peace and equity. I am your host, Chinny Nwagbo, and I am excited to be here today. We're going to have a good conversation. And on today's episode, we will be speaking to our special guest on mental toughness, something that I definitely have, and preparation, where preparation meets performance. That's like what I like to call it, where preparation meets performance. But before we do that, of course, you know I have to introduce my favorite co-host of all time, Emmett Shepard. Emmett, what you got?
Chinny, you don't have to do that. Hello, everyone. My name's Emmett. Welcome to the show. And, I'm pulsating with excitement, one could say, with our next guest. Chinny, you know what to do. Who is this?
Well, you guys, thank you all for being here and lending us your listening ear. Our guest today is the host of the weekly podcast, Intentional Performers, the founder of Strong Skills, which provides executive coaching and mental performance coaching. He's the author of the book, Shift Your Mind, where he walks you through 9 key mental shifts to elevate your preparation and your performance like an elite performer. And little did you guys know, but he helped in aiding us build this podcast itself, the Play It Forward podcast. So we are excited to have you. Please help us welcome Brian Levenson. Welcome, Brian.
Chinny and Emmett, you both have like a shift that occurs with your voice when you go live. And Emmett has like a boy band voice coming out. It's ready to do Backstreet Boys or NSYNC.
Right, yeah. And he has a handsome to go with it too. You know, he has the handsome to go with it as well.
You guys, all right, I don't even need to be here anymore. I'm just gonna go. I have enough compliments to fulfill my life. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Emmett, you know what to do.
Yes. Brian, it's a custom on the Play It Forward podcast, one could say, to open up the show with an icebreaker. I'm kind of known on the streets as the icebreaker king, some would call me.
Indeed.
And so the icebreaker question today for you is, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
I love the hard blinks.
I feel like
sweating. Are you sweating over there?
A little bit. I feel like I just did something.
Yeah.
And I just need to put my finger on it because I was just telling a story about this.
Oh, we're excited. This is going to be juicy.
I'm ready.
I'm ready too.
What was the first?
And don't worry, this is not the first time we have had people have to go deep into their minds to figure out how to answer this brilliant question. As Emmett said, he is and will always be the master.
Right, and we'll only judge you a lot with your answer. So
I don't think I have an answer. I have an answer about a memorable experience that I was thinking about this the other day. I went skydiving when I was like 14 years old.
Oh, cool.
And just how that experience is, as much as I didn't want to do it, and as much as like I hate roller coasters, I felt like doing that at that age really was a transformative experience for me, just because it taught me to go toward things more often. You'd think I'd remember what my first thing is, but for me, jumping out of an airplane was a really big deal. And at a young age, my parents sort of challenged us to go toward adventure, whether that was whitewater rafting or going out west and going hiking, or I remember going hella hiking or skiing, or adventure was a big part of my upbringing and childhood. And so I'll probably have something click in over the next hour that I remember. But I think when you're parenting kids, which I have a 5.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old, I'm constantly trying to get them to experience something new. And with the pandemic, it was absolutely a challenge because you wanted to get them into spaces that they could just be in that were safe. And I think sometimes when we go towards safety, the downside of that is we don't always necessarily grow, but we need that safety in order to then have risk and exposure. So It's something I think about quite often is what's the right blend of trying something new and also going toward the comforts of routine and habit that we all, I think, need in our life as well.
Totally.
That's good. You know why it's good is because it's like being a professional athlete, right? You're always getting a little bit better, but you're also finding the routine and getting better. You're finding the routine and stepping outside of that comfort zone. So you're always, this is going to sound weird, comfortably uncomfortable because of the growth. And that sounds like what you just said.
And Chinny, I'll give you an example of something I did during the pandemic, which we hadn't done before, is we started videoing our kids about what they're grateful for. And at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot that we weren't grateful for. And so we did it every day before the kids went to bed. And that was something that I did for the first time. I started playing the guitar a couple of years ago and experimented with that. I hired a dietitian over the pandemic, and that was something I hadn't done before. So I kind of try to go toward those things more often while knowing that I'm not wired to do that. Like I very much am comfortable being comfortable, and I'm not someone who's an adrenaline junkie. I do love like novice experiences. And tonight we're hosting someone at our house for the first time in I don't know how long. And we're going to learn from him. So that's kind of what I'm always looking to do is create experiences and events that are new. Because I think when we have novelty in our life, we often learn from that experience.
Totally. You always have to seek some discomfort. I totally agree.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about what that mindset needs to be in order to grow. So moving right into it. First of all, that was a really good answer. So thank you for sharing that. That was good. But just want to get right into the nitty gritty of it and just hear about you and your story and your connection to PeacePlayers. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and just connect it to why we're here today.
Yeah. So Chinny, we both went to Syracuse and
we sure did.
Shout
Orange.
Shout out to those Orange people. And, for me, when I was in college, I was really not sure what I wanted to do with my life. I majored in sociology. I minored in African-American studies. I minored in political science. I just took classes I was interested in. Who knows, Chinny, we might've been in a class together. It's kind of weird to think about. But I did not have a plan or a path or a vision. And so I think my dad was someone who had supported PeacePlayers. And when I was really struggling to figure out what I wanted to do, I think he connected me with Brendan Toohey and said, hey, Brian, because I applied for Teach for America. I did not get in. I was interested in trying to do good. And so I think I connected with Brendan first, and that's when I became aware of PeacePlayers. There were some other organizations that I spoke to as well. And then I graduated, I needed a job. So I worked in sales, and I worked in sales for 2.5, 3 years. And during that time, that's when I also found the profession that I went into, which is sports psychology. Today, my time is spent working with athletes and sports teams. And also I coach a lot of executives. And to bring it back to where I really got my teeth sunk into PeacePlayers was when I moved back to Washington, D.C. after I had finished my master's in sports psychology. PeacePlayers was running a Washington, D.C. program, and they asked me to come and do some workshops and speaking for them. So I got to do that. And then really what grabbed my attention is they brought over some of the Israelis and the Arabs from the Middle Eastern site. And watching those girls interact and their relationships grabbed me. And then I went to Israel with PeacePlayers, and honestly, the rest was history, because I really cultivated amazing relationships with the coaches and the players and the families. And I think what makes PeacePlayers different than a lot of other programs is that the relationships are genuine. They are lifelong. They are deep. And for me, I've always been relationship driven, and PeacePlayers fills that bucket for me time and time again. So I'm really fortunate to be involved with PeacePlayers in whatever capacity I can be.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, no, that probably would change my life too. But that's an amazing experience. And like you said, like the experiences that we go through in life, they shift how we think and who we are. And I want to bring to light your 12 strong skills. And we saw that on your site. And it appears to focus on just being your very best self. And I want to know, where do you draw the line of having to always be on versus being okay with being in the gray area? Because sometimes when people hear being your very best self, it's like, as athletes, we're always on. And so tell me where the balance is with just being okay with not always being this high performer, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, look, Emmett started by asking me a question that I had no idea the answer to. And I don't know how long my silence was. It felt like a minute. And I think for me, I'm used to having answers, and I'm used to people asking me questions and then me sharing what I've learned and my expertise. I'm not that old, Chinny. We're not that old. And then I don't know how old you are, but the older I get, the more I realize that not having answers is also completely appropriate. And that's actually where we learn. Like,
Right.
what would the world be if we knew the answers to everything?
Right.
I think about kids who just have this endless curiosity, and my kids are just constantly asking me questions that I don't know the answer to. And what would it look like if we took on that child's mind and the curiosity, and also be okay with not knowing? And so,
Right.
Chinny, like, to answer the first part, which is, for me at least, I tend to get responses from people that I'm authentic and that I'm genuine. I also wasn't the kid that was labeled a genius at a young age. I wasn't spectacular at anything. So for me, like, being genuine and authentic is the only option. I can't fake it. I can't fake something else. So performance for me is just the ability to execute and to share your expertise. And I do think it's okay to not always have the answers. As it relates to best self, that's one of the skills we talk about teaching our people. And I don't think it's that you're your best self all the time. I think it's going toward the things that can unlock the best version of you. So what are those things?
Got it.
Fulfillment, service, purpose, flow state, relationships, optimism, growth. These are skills and things that we train people on so that hopefully they can have their best version of themselves come out and shine in that way. And then the other strong skills that we teach too are also designed to try to help people develop, so that we call them strong skills, because in the corporate world, they call emotional intelligence, communication, teamwork, leadership, those things as soft skills. And coming from sports background, soft, you get cut for being soft. You get traded for being soft. Nobody will sign you if you're soft. So we are really trying to reimagine how the world thinks about these skills and really put the value on these skills that they deserve. And we believe skills like your best self and having clarity about what that looks like will help people become stronger.
Right. Wow.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Brian, because thinking in terms of our youth and that idea of constantly and daily trying to be your best self can be pretty mentally exhausting. And so from personal experience, someone who's in the past has been an athlete, I was, over the past year, because of the pandemic, trying to work on myself. And it was the most exhausting thing I had ever done. It was way more exhausting than any physical challenge I ever did. Was the daily sort of inner voice in my head, making sure that I was sort of checking all the boxes in terms of making sure that I was my best self. And sort of that idea of staying mentally strong. I think there's two things that a lot of young people don't realize, which is, one, it's a lot harder than you think.
Absolutely.
And two, you're not going to see results instantaneously, usually.
Right.
And for young people, those two things, that's a really hard sort of metaphorical pill to swallow. So I'm just curious, in your mind, what are some things that you could give to young people for advice about making sure, to stay on that sort of track, so to speak?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, we had a hard time even labeling this competency because we were really trying to pull from positive psychology, but we didn't feel like positive psychology was phrased even the right way. I think the phrase that we might end up landing on is actually well-being, because
There
I
you
think
go. I like that.
if we are our best self, then we are focused on our own well-being. And I think that's probably what we mean by best self. And the one thing I'll say though, Emmett, is you said it can be exhausting. And I think there's a distinction to be made between exhausting and exhausted. And I think part of growing is exhausting your effort to find out what you're passionate about, what you're curious about, what your purpose is. And yeah, it like doing heart work, and I say heart like soul work and deep work is exhausting. There's no question. I think if anyone's ever been to therapy, it can be exhausting. If anybody ever tries to train for a marathon, it's exhausting. I've had people on my podcast who climb Mount Everest. It's exhausting, but exhausted, I think, is unhealthy. And if you're exhausted, then that means that you're not probably purposeful. You're probably not passionate. You're probably not in service to something bigger than yourself.
Right.
So that distinction is big. And then the last part, and then Chinny, I see you're like ready to chat here. The last thing I'll say on this is, for your youth that are listening to this, think about service. All right. What does it mean to be a great teammate? Like, you should get energy from service. Anyone that ever volunteers at a soup kitchen or at their local church, it tends to actually give you energy. When you have purpose, right? When you have an inner motivation that drives action, when you're intrinsically motivated, the work doesn't necessarily always feel like work. When you're in the flow state, you have a presence about you and things tend to slow down. Like, that's a pretty amazing experience. Relationships, when you have strong relationships and we have social connectivity based around love, right? Any team or family or friendship that is based on love is usually pretty energizing. Absolutely. Optimism and growth, these are things that really allow us to improve and get better. And then fulfillment, to serve with joy and have a sense of joy derived from hard work and feeling fulfillment. Those things should fill your cup more than they empty it. So that's really what we're talking about when we think about well-being or best self. And there's science that backs up all of those concepts, and it's really profound, and it's housed mainly in positive psychology.
That was awesome. And I heard you say flow, and I had to get my book. I don't know if you read this book, but flow.
Except me, the best name ever.
You know it. And you know what I was thinking when you said that, because you said exhausting versus exhausted. And I want to really pinpoint this, is that when you're working in service, when you're serving something greater than yourself, and you are aligned with your purpose, and you are doing the work that matters and speaks to you and fulfills you, you don't think about being exhausted. And exhausting doesn't necessarily exist anymore because of the gratification that you get from pouring yourself into something. And you know, there are moments where you can just keep going and going and going and going because it's just so great, and you're doing it from a place of love. And honestly, exhausting or exhausted doesn't fill your mind. And so it's not even a part of your vocabulary, because you're stretching yourself in ways that you never knew existed, because you're doing what you were sent here to do. And that speaks to that mental wellness, that toughness, that everything we're going to talk about today. And so thank you for sharing that. That is my life. That's how I feel. But I think it's so key to really hone in on how we use our words, because Emmett said something great earlier today when he talked about mental toughness and strength and fortitude. We often say to kids, be strong, but we don't tell them how to be strong. Like, and we don't tell them why being strong is beneficial to them. And so I do want to really commend you on moving to the word wellness, because that promotes like a space to be who you are, and not be judged on the fact that you don't know how to be strong in every area. So I wanted to share that.
Yeah, and the exhausting piece I can relate to. I mean, I study this stuff for a living, and if you study this stuff for a living, you might read stuff that says you need to meditate for 20 minutes a day. You need to exercise for an hour a day. You need to journal for 30 a day. You need to you need to read for 30 a day.
Right,
Then
right.
you need to express gratitude. Then you
Mhm.
need to reach out to 10 friends and talk to them
Right.
every day. Then you need like it does.
Right.
And Emmett's nodding his head, like it can feel overwhelming.
Right.
And you know, a lot of times we just need to ground ourselves in that present space and just be where our feet are and just be in that place where from there we can grow and develop. And I think we went with best self because it really comes from psychology for us. A
Best self,
lot
yeah.
of the history of psychology was based on if you have a problem, go get help. And if you're sick, you can go see someone and they're going to get you better. And really, the work that I do is not with sick people. The work
Right.
I do is with people that just want to get better.
Right.
And so they just want to be the best version of them.
Right.
And so that's why we sort of focus on that. And in our best self definition, we say focused on the wellness and the science around happiness, optimal functioning, and what people look like when they are at their best.
Mhm.
I still think we probably, as I see you all nod from well-being, I think it probably should shift to
Yeah.
well-being, but
100%.
that's sort of the origins of the phrase.
Well, one thing that I think is important to say that you brought up is that there has to be, at least for young people, and my own personal experience was like this past year when I wanted to get better and I did go to therapy, it was that there was that core belief at the beginning where it was me saying to myself, you know, I want to do this. Like there's that element of like an ember of self-love that starts this fire. And if you just do those things that you listed of the box checking of like, all right, I have to meditate in the morning, I have to go on a run, I have to work out, I have to reach out to 10 friends, that will start that shift between exhausting and feeling very exhausted because
Absolutely.
you're already going into it being like, this grocery list of items should fulfill me or get me to that point. And I think the
Right.
biggest distinction is like, as a young person, you have to go in being like, you want to do this. This is for you.
And we're imperfect. So
Mhm.
8 hours of sleep a night, right? We now know science around sleep is pretty profound. Okay, well, what happens when you have 5 hours of sleep? Because guess
Right.
what? Sometimes we can't sleep. And
Mhm.
as
Right.
much as I'd love to be on a full tank, I know there are nights where I don't get a full night's sleep. So then what do we do? And I often say, well, give 100 of whatever you got. Meditation is such a good example. I remember meditating and it was the morning and my kids were like coming in, they wanted my attention. And instead of giving them my attention, I was like, no, I need to meditate.
Mhm.
And I thought about it, I was like, wait a second. The whole purpose of the meditation is so I can be present for my kids.
Right, right.
Right.
Stop the meditation and
yourself.
go be with my kids and
Right.
give
Right.
them me.
Right.
And so I think agility is one of the most underrated skills that humans can possess. And if we step into agility and the ability to sort of expand rather than contract and to be able to handle different situations and understand that we don't have to perfect every situation and we can have the agility to move into this and move into that. I think that adaptability and agility, especially when we're performing as basketball players, but even more so as we're developing relationships with human
Yeah.
beings, you're not going to perfect a relationship. You're not going to perfect a game. I can talk about where perfectionism can serve you because I think it can in certain times and areas, but agility, a pandemic, if you try to perfect the pandemic, good luck.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not going to happen, but
Right.
agility allows you room and space to move and to go into nooks and crannies that maybe you hadn't previously.
Yeah.
And that mental agility, and Chinny, feel free to chime in because this totally relates to me and you as athletes, that mental agility in terms of seeing the world as gray rather than black and white, where it's like, if you don't meditate in the morning because you want to spend time with your kids, you don't say, your inner voice doesn't say, wow, you're such a failure for not meditating.
Right.
As athletes, that's a hard voice to like quiet down.
Turn off.
Because
Yeah.
we've been trained to be like, it's black and white. You either
Right.
shoot 500 free throws a day or you don't, and you didn't get better that day kind of thing.
Right.
So it's interesting where it's like, once that shift happens, that you have to like totally change your inner voice. Should you go ahead?
No, you're spot on. And I would say that, and I'm going to get a little bit creative with you guys, that the agility in that example that you gave would be understanding that meditation doesn't just happen when you're sitting by yourself. I am in a constant meditative state, and I believe it to be so. I'm always like, especially when I go out and run, that is the best meditation for me. Like I am somewhere else. And if you read the book Flow, they'll talk about that. But it's the agility is understanding that if things are not as they appear to be, and you can create anything at any time in any way. And I know that doesn't make any sense, but it makes perfect sense to me. And when we get into the preparation and performance part, you'll start to see where I'm coming with that. But yeah, I'm with you with agility, and I'm almost saying that we define who we are with our own metrics in our own way, and that's where we get to our optimal selves. When we can stop using the lens around us to look at others and try to measure, okay, is this my best self? And you can start to have that voice in your head that reassures you that you are living in every moment as your best self.
Right.
So that's what I'll say about that. And I know that was pretty deep, but
no, we like it deep.
As you were talking about your meditative state, I'm not a meditation expert.
Right.
But I make a distinction between mindfulness and meditation, because to me, what you're talking about is I want to live mindfully. So what does that mean? I'm going to notice the clouds. I'm going to look into my kids' eyes and see them and like really see them. Right. I am going to put the phone away at dinner and really be with my family or my friends. And I'm going to notice and I'm going to observe thoughts or the chatter that Emmett's talking about in his head. Like I'm going to notice those things. I'm going to be mindful of them. I'm going to observe them, but I'm not going to let them define my behavior, my actions. Right. And so I think mindfulness is noticing and observing thoughts without judgment. And to me, we can do that in a variety of ways. To your point, Chinny, it can be running. It doesn't have to be sitting in silence. And I have taken the same approach where to me, meditation is a tool and something that I can sit down and I can meditate and I can build muscle on the ability to be mindful. But more importantly for me is the ability to be mindful more often. And that could be putting my feet on the ground and thinking about 3 things I'm grateful for. Right. That could be when I'm driving, like noticing my surroundings or going for a walk or just nature. I mean, I think we can get in those headspaces so often. So I love mindfulness as a superpower. And for me, meditation is the act of doing mindfulness. But that's just me. And that's how I've made sense of it. And it's been liberating to separate the two.
There you go.
Yeah, I very much agree.
I knew I'd be happy to have you today. Oh my goodness, this is awesome. So, Emmett, you know what time it is?
Yes. We take a little exhale. Everybody take a brief exhale before we jump right back in. There's a thing we like to do, Brian, on the show called the lightning round, where we ask you a bunch of questions and you have to answer in under 3 seconds. And you'll be judged very highly on.
All right, but you'll enjoy this though. This is fun.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, then he'll enjoy this, Chinny, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, first one. What was the last thing that made you smile?
This right now, I'm smiling.
Awesome.
I'm smiling.
Awesome.
First favorite time of day.
I'm not a morning person, and I have an issue with our society saying you have to win the morning and dominate the morning, because I have not dominated the morning my entire life.
I can dominate the night. Yes.
So I would say my favorite time of day, I'll tell you what it is. It's the moment. So I usually end my day at 6:00. And I used to have an office. So I would drive my car or I'd walk home from the office and I'd go in the garage and I'd open the door. And my kids would run up to me and say, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home." And that moment is my favorite time of day. And I'll give you one more on that. So when the pandemic hit, I shut my office down, worked from home, set up the home office. And so I started to come downstairs and nothing would happen. Like it would be like, okay, come have dinner. There would be no transition. So I trained my kids to run up to me when I come down the stairs and say, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home." And so they do it now every time. I got them trained. Good. We practiced it. So that's my favorite time of day is when I get the "Daddy's home."
You're like, "Daddy needs this. You don't understand. Daddy needs
I train them. It's all about me.
And that was way over our 3-second.
Told you.
Meal of the day.
That was a good answer.
Favorite meal of the day.
Favorite meal of the day, yeah.
I'll go dinner.
Okay. Good. Sweet or salty food?
Salty.
Favorite sport?
Lost me there.
Basketball.
Yes.
Scuba diving or skydiving?
Skydiving.
Favorite place in the world to travel?
Africa.
Ooh.
Last thing you laughed at?
I watched a documentary. The guy who like videoed himself at home over the pandemic. The
Bo
comedian.
Burnham.
Yeah, that
Bo
guy.
Burnham,
That was pretty funny. It was more impressive than funny, but there was a lot of laughter there too.
I very much agree. Inside on Netflix, people watch it. It's very impressive.
Very nice.
Last book you read?
I just finished a book. The guy I'm having over today is an author. His name's Mark Polymeropoulos. Mark was in the CIA for 28 years, and he's going to come speak to my friends and my clients. His book is called Clarity in Crisis. It's a leadership book. Good book, great book. And Mark's seen some stuff. And so highly recommend it.
Okay. Save it or spend it?
Tough one. Spend it.
Dine in? I like it. Dine in or dine out?
These are good.
Yeah.
Dine in.
Country or city life?
City.
Ooh.
Name a person who inspires you.
Ooh, I love this one.
There's a few that come to mind. I'll tell someone who I met through PeacePlayers. His name's Kyle Maynard. Kyle's a quadruple amputee. We climbed Masada in Israel together. He's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I think of Kyle often when I think of inspiration, but I would also say, honestly, the amount of people that I've met through PeacePlayers that are inspiring, I can't even stop to say. I mean, cool. We had dinner a week ago with the two people that run the Middle East, and they're inspiring, and Karen and like these people are amazingly inspiring. But anytime I'm on a site, whether it's in Baltimore or we've been in New York, anywhere I go with PeacePlayers, I would say PeacePlayers is just inspiring. That is probably the word. It is just so much inspiration in one organization. So everyone that I ever interact with at PeacePlayers is inspiring.
Very nice.
And thank you. That's our show. I think
right.
Wow,
that was awesome.
Name one thing you want to leave the world with after you're gone.
My kids.
Oh, that's nice. That's sweet.
That's so nice.
Yeah.
And then what's one takeaway you want our listeners to remember from today?
You know, there's a great quote that I think is apropos for what you all are doing, which is from Einstein, and it's, I have no special talent, I'm only passionately curious. And so I think if the world could continue to be curious and learn, and I think when you fire up a podcast, the idea is to learn and to be curious. And when you listen to a podcast, if you're listening to this, it's probably because you're curious. And so I think when we go towards curiosity, we can learn so much. And so I just think keep leaning into curiosity. And I also think when we're in areas of conflict, or when we are with people that we don't necessarily always get along with, if we could just be a little bit more curious for a little bit longer, it will serve everybody involved.
Yes. Yeah. Curious with an open mindset. Definitely love that. That was good. So now we're going to transition right into the book. So I've got a question about this one. Shift Your Mind, the 9 mental shifts to thrive in preparation and performance. And you wrote this, and this is amazing. But what I want to talk about here is preparation and performance. And in the book, it says, what we think and when dictates how far we can go and what we're capable of when it's time to deliver. These are one of the 3 critical realizations. And the second one says, the preparation mind and the performance mind are not just different, they are opposites. And then the third realization is we need to practice the performance mind in order to leverage it when the time comes. Now, this is what I'd like to talk about. So I've read books like Relentless by Tim Grover and Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, right? Tim Grover talks about this good to great to unstoppable. And if you guys don't know who that is, it's Michael Jordan's coach, trainer at the time. And then Malcolm Gladwell, who is amazing. And you should know who Malcolm Gladwell is. And he talks about the 10,000 hour rule, all of which are associated, I guess, to strategically dissect the notion of mental toughness in relation to sports, right? And you suggest that the preparation mind is the opposite of the performance mindset. And so this is okay. So coming from me, right? I found that I agree with Tim Grover, the good to great to unstoppable, and I agree with the 10,000 hour rule. And so when you talk about the preparation versus performance mindset, I've always felt it as, and it could be because I've gotten to a certain level where my performance and preparation mindset are one and the same, in that there is not a practice that I'm not performing, in that there, like, for me, I think you get to a certain level and it just is exactly the same on both. Like I'm super competitive. I'm always in a space where my performance is that of it's the same as preparation. And so I guess my question is, how did you arrive at a place where you've decided that the preparation mindset was different than the performance mindset? Like even now, sometimes I feel like at all times I'm like performing, but not in a way where I'm performing for the world. I'm performing for an audience of myself and God. And I am consistently like that, almost to, some people will say, to a fault, because I'm on that level all the time. And so I want to hear how you got to this idea that preparation mindset and the performance mindset are opposite.
All right, a lot to unpack there. So, first of all, Chinny, what position did you play in basketball?
Power forward.
And
undersized.
Would you watch film?
100. So when I was in high school, I started in ninth grade. I was horrible. And my coach would make sure that we watched about an hour to 2 hours of film. I watched it as a professional athlete as well. I played professionally for 11 years. Yeah.
And Chinny, what was your mindset when you were watching film?
My mindset was that it's always, I need to get better, but it was just watching what I did and the areas and places where I can improve. And also I was thinking how to be better in terms of receiving that coaching. And I know that you're going to say that that's the preparation mindset, because I read it in the book, but yes.
Right. And then when you're between the lines and it's game day and you're playing in the Carrier Dome, were you focused on, I need to get better, I need to improve this, I need to improve that, or were you focused on something different?
So this is where I want to present this to you. At that time, I hadn't had enough practice and preparation. But it's different if you talk about the lines in my 10th year as a professional athlete. It was almost second nature. And that's why I'm making that correlation between the preparation mindset and the performance mindset, because there was no thought. It was just, I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes I'd make a move in a game, and this is not an exaggeration. I'd be like, oh my God, you just made this move. Great job. Like that's because I didn't know. I just went through the motions and it happened. And so, yeah, that's how I felt.
Yeah. So let me try to peel back the onion and then the layers a little bit here. So here's my thesis, and I can talk about why I landed on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Preparation is the action or process of making ourselves ready and competent. It's about learning, growing, improving, getting better.
Right.
Performance is about executing. And when you're saying I didn't even have to think about it, because you're just executing. And I would argue you're just present. And the way you get to being in that space is by preparing with the future in mind.
Right.
And maybe that's using visualization, maybe it's watching film, maybe it's, studying your opponents. But if we improve, grow, get better, we earn the right to then focus on execution. Practice, which you mentioned, to me is a combination of both the preparation mind and the performance mind.
Okay.
So a great practice, yes, you're going to go time and score, and you're going to have to execute. A great practice will say, we need to make 9 out of 10 free throws or else everyone's running, because there's a consequence. There's some sort of judgment. There's an evaluation that takes place. That's sports. There's an evaluation. You win, you lose, there's score. That's how it works. So to me, great coaches will figure out when we're trying to master a skill and improve. So maybe you're trying new footwork in the post, or maybe you're trying to extend your range to 3. That needs to be in preparation mode, because it's about learning, growing, trying to get better. But then there also needs to be practicing of the performance mind, and practicing where they're coming at you full speed and they're closing out and you still have to snap your wrist and score. So to me, that ability to shift from the preparation mind to the performance mind is huge. And practice is the opportunity to work on both of those mindsets. How I came to see this was, it started by reading a book. So Tom Coughlin's book, the former head coach of the New York Football Giants.
Oh yeah, I read it.
He talked about, we need to be humble enough to prepare and confident enough to perform. And when I heard humble to prepare and confident to perform, I was like, that's brilliant. So I started working with all these athletes, golfers, basketball, soccer, baseball, softball. And I would say, all right, what does humility look like for you in preparation? And what does confidence look like for you in performance? And what we started to recognize was, wow, there are these other pieces to their mindset and preparation that are different than their mindset to performance. And we created a list of 30 to 40 of these shifts that people need to make in a variety of sports. Then I started working with executives, and we started talking about how they needed a shift as well. So I started to see this show up over and over again. And I started noticing that oftentimes what would get in the way for people is that they'd bring their preparation mind into their performance.
I read it. Yeah.
Or they would bring their performance mind into their preparation. So that led me down this path of exploring it. And for me, once I saw that framework, I couldn't unsee it. I saw it with Chris Rock. I saw it with Serena Williams. I saw it with, the president of the United States. I would see it everywhere. And that's why I wrote the book. Yeah,
no, I read that. And I read the example you gave. I believe he was a baseball player, and every single time he would step in between get on the field, he wasn't, excuse me, his best self, because his preparation mind would find him there. And for all of you listening, preparation mind in the midst of performance is bad. Just like the performance mind in the midst of preparation mind is not good, because if you have a performance mindset, when it needs to be preparation, then you're never learning. And if you have a preparation mindset when it needs to be performing, then you're doubting yourself. You're thinking over about things that you don't need to think about. And so I read that part in the book, and I thought it was brilliant. And I just wanted to, get to the point where you thought that they were opposites. And in that case, it makes sense. Makes sense to me.
And I would also clarify, it was his best self. It was just the wrong time to bring that part of himself out. So what got him to the level he was at was that he was perfectionistic, was that he was humble, all the things on the preparation side, like he was really, really good at, and that got him to a place of competence, but it didn't unlock his potential because he stayed there and didn't shift out of those things. So if we overuse something, it can backfire. And if we underuse something, it can backfire. And so the book is really about this idea of when, and I would even argue that some of the shifts may not resonate with certain people for certain roles and certain jobs. And that's totally cool. It's not a panacea. It's not a one size fits all idea. The real purpose is to try to get people to think about when do I need to be this way? When do I need to be that way? And understanding that our best self is humble and arrogant. And I use that word arrogant, which is going to frustrate people and cause them to tense up. But it is an intentional word that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I think I can be humble and I can be arrogant. And I got to tell you, I saw so many athletes be afraid to step into arrogance and performance and instead go to humble. And I'll leave you with this last thought. Jay Crowder last night makes this amazing pass to DeAndre Ayton. He slams dunk and alley-oop, and the Suns win to take a 2-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals. Jay Crowder's stat line last night was 0 for 3.
Yeah.
I don't know if he scored.
Yeah, I don't
think he played a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
And so arrogance can be that pass. We can be arrogant in our role. Like you can, it's this unshakable belief that he has that he can make that pass.
Right.
That pass was ridiculous. DeAndre Ayton going up and getting it was ridiculous too. Right. But it doesn't have to be all about me all the time, which is what I think people think of arrogance. It's just that, yes, I'm the right person for the job. And I have this unshakable belief. And just because I haven't gotten the results doesn't mean I'm still not going to contribute and add value to this team. And arrogance can trip people up. And I understand that. I also want to bring up, if you do the preparation mind, you should earn the right to step into your performance mind. Mm-hmm. So ideally, these also feed each other. So we want to get reps in both. And if done properly, the preparation mind will actually help us earn the right to step into the performance mind. But we have to be aware that we want to bring out that self, that part of ourself in the performance. And I see far too many people hold back on their performance mind.
No, that's a great answer. And so, since you mentioned the humility and arrogance, one of my biggest questions was, because you use Kanye West as an example in your book, right? And we know that, well, I don't know if everybody knows, but Kanye West suffers from severe bipolar issues, right? He has a lot of highs and lows. And I was wondering, what's the difference between, and you mentioned it just a tad bit, what's the difference between confidence and arrogance, and who gets to decide what someone is being, especially in this case, where, in the case in your book, where I think he suffers from psychological illness that would probably, to the overall world seem like arrogance, but in actuality, we are kind of borderlining the mental health and wellness and this idea of humility and arrogance. And so, like, who gets to decide that? And do we factor in, psychological illness? Do we factor in these different things when we're talking about your notion of humility and arrogance? I don't know if that's clear. Is that clear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I don't know what he suffers from. And even if I was a clinical psychologist, he's not my patient. So I don't know either. I think all of us are susceptible to mental illness. I think all of us could be depressed. I think all of us could have clinical issues. And what I'll say is that, from my perspective and my observing, is arrogance doesn't have to be outward. It can be inner. And in working with a lot of elite athletes, we talk about what is their self-talk, what's their dialogue that they're having with themselves, and what is that inner relationship that they're having. So yes, there are going to be assumptions made in the book. And I even say with Kanye, like, I'm not suggesting that we look up to him as a role model or not. I think each of us have to figure that out. But I like to study people that are elite at what they do and try to figure out, well, what is it that how do they approach what they approach, and try to make sense of that. And then try to look at the science and what does the research say about humility, for example. So our society says, stay humble, stay hungry, right? We hear it all the time. Stay humble, stay hungry. Nobody's willing to say, be arrogant, because we've identified arrogance as bad. And one of the things that I sort of challenge, and I would even say, like, look at ADHD. So we often as kids are taught ADHD, oh, that's a bad thing. But so many brilliant minds have had ADHD and done amazing things in this world. There are people that have Asperger's that have done amazing things in this world. And so I'm just going to go back to humble and arrogant. We say humility good, arrogance bad. Well, what do we really mean by that? And there's actually research that says that we can be overly humble as leaders, and it can backfire. There's been research that shows that. But back to Kanye, look, I think when I see him, I see a musical genius. I don't think that's really debatable. And you don't have to like his music. If you talk to people that study music, they'll say his beats and the way he composes music is really genius. So there's something in him that I'm trying to figure out, well, what is it? And look, I think he's an interesting guy to study, and it's not for me or anybody else to say what he is or what he isn't. Right. But when I watched him at the Carrier Dome, I saw somebody who was acting with arrogance. When I watch Steph Curry come across half court and think that he's in range, to me, that seems like he has an unshakable belief that he can make that shot. When I watch Trae Young do what he does, when I watch Jay Crowder make that pass, to me, there is an inner arrogance that is going on there. Do I know that for a fact? No. But that's sort of how I look at it. And by the way, I think arrogance by itself is really dangerous. And I think it if you don't pair it with humility, it really can cripple relationships. It can cripple your dynamic on a team. It can be toxic. Mm-hmm. And, without knowing Kanye again, like just watching him from an outside world, I think he struggles with some of that other piece to the puzzle that allows us to fulfill our potential. So, I think he's an interesting one for sure.
I'm want to go back to something you had said earlier, which was you spent a lot of time thinking about identifying arrogance as the word itself, which I'm fascinated with as well, because like you said, I think it has been just put into a negative connotation, much like the word selfish or something like that. When I was like first going through a lot of the self-help and stuff like that, one of the first things my therapist said was like, you have to understand that selfish isn't necessarily a negative thing. Being selfish when it's to benefit yourself in like a daily practice is okay. Like I need to take some time to go on a run or something like that. But I'm curious sort of with arrogance, why did you choose that as the word other than confidence? Because I think you could make a strong case that every athlete who's a professional athlete has a baseline of confidence that is above the average person, like a Joe Schmo like me kind of thing, where I have a friend of a friend who's a Chicago Cubs player, and I asked him, like, what was it like? Were you like shocked when you got drafted? Was it an amazing night? And he was kind of like, no, I know I'm supposed to be here. This is like what I want to do. And it clicked in my head. I was like, oh, most of these athletes just believe and are aware and confident that they're at this sort of tier. And I'm curious why confidence was not the word you chose and rather arrogance, and just that dynamic.
So I think we need confidence all the time. I think someone who's humble, you better be confident. I think the most humble people in the world actually have confidence. So I think we need it in both preparation and performance. I think confidence also helps us trust no matter what, that we have the ability to find a way forward to make progress. And to me, that speaks to some of the preparation mind. I also think it's less fierce and potent than the arrogance that your friend of a friend had, that he has this belief in himself. When Steph Curry gets passed over and gets one scholarship opportunity to go play at Davidson, like what in his right mind says that he can play in the NBA? The U.S. women's national team, when they go out and dominate the way that they do, to me, this is this unshakable belief that we see in teams, we see in individuals. Serena Williams playing pregnant or coming back and doing the things that she's able to do. Katie Ledecky, Usain Bolt. I could go through performer after performer. I'm just talking sports. To me, it's this unshakable belief that I have in myself. And that to me is arrogance in that performance.
Okay.
And for me, like the one reason that it's seen as positive confidence, whereas arrogance is seen as negatives, it is because we've seen arrogance backfire. And we've seen the person who puts their neck out and says they're going to do X, Y, and Z and then gets knocked out. Mm-hmm. And that is an embarrassing, shameful feeling that we often see. And so I think embarrassment and shame often drive us from sticking our neck out and saying that we can do it. And the last thing I'll say is around self-talk. So Ethan Cross, who's got a new book out called Chatter, in 2010 did research at Michigan State about speaking in the third person. So when LeBron says, LeBron can do this, that, and the other, and he speaks in the third person, I would identify that as being arrogant. But what he found is that when we do that, we actually disassociate from ourselves, and it gives us the space and the freedom to step into being gentler to ourselves, kinder, more compassionate to ourselves. It's actually an amazing coping mechanism for when we are afraid, when we are fearful, because we know, like, if I were to say to you, Emmett, I was like, hey, Emmett, you've got this podcast. You're going to crush it. You're going to do really well. That's easier for me to say to you than it actually is for me to say to myself. Mm-hmm. And so I think we need that unshakable third person self-talk to allow us to be successful. And it could be inner. It doesn't have to be flexing your muscles. It doesn't have to be talking trash. I think of like a Tim Duncan, and I've spent time with the Spurs thanks to PeacePlayers.
Right.
And if you listen to people in the Spurs, will talk about Duncan, like he has this belief that he can figure things out and do great things. And it doesn't have to be outward. It can be an inner belief. So those are some of my thoughts on arrogance, but I understand the pushback. If you've ever worked for an arrogant jerk or had an arrogant teammate, like it sucks.
Yeah.
And so the only way that we should be arrogant is if we earn the right to be arrogant through humble preparation. And that distinction is really, really important and can get lost in the shuffle when someone sees that word.
And also, I want to present this just being an African-American woman, Black woman in our society. Because you said two reasons for why arrogance is received poorly, or just no one likes the idea, the negative connotation that is associated with arrogance. But it's also too that arrogance doesn't work for every single demographic. Like me being a Black woman in society and moving with an air of arrogance is not going to get me the same thing as maybe a white guy who's moving in arrogance. Oh, well, he's just confident. Arrogance then translates into something else. And so that's why there would be, for me, reluctance to use the word arrogance, because how can I be arrogant in a system that deems me less than already, right? And then how is that going to be perceived when I'm moving in this air of arrogance? And so that's what I was thinking about too. But you said it earlier, right? Humility as well. It doesn't serve historically underserved groups. So being over humble, I guess, doesn't serve certain groups. So yeah, it can. I guess it can go both ways.
I love that you brought it up. So 2 points that I'll make.
Yes.
One, go to a different shift. And by the way, I have 9. They are not the 9 shifts. Come up with your own. Like, what would success mean for the book? It would just mean that people are thinking about how they need to be in preparation mind and how they need to be in performance mind. You decide, what is it that you need? Because I agree.
Absolutely.
I even talk about gender in the book. I don't think I hit on race, but I hit on gender.
Okay.
Men need to do a better job of acknowledging when women are stepping into this arrogance and giving them the keys to go do it. Because the research on confidence, men versus women, is that men tend to overconfident themselves and women tend to underconfident themselves.
100%. Yes.
That affects pay and that affects, job applications.
Absolutely.
And so as a man, like what can I do that when I see the U.S. women's national team dominate and I see our media say they're being too arrogant, I need to check that, right? I need to check that and I need to call that out and be like, no. We need badass, fierce, amazing women who are willing to step into their arrogance when they are competing and performing. And so that's allyship. And that's where we need to, as men, think about what can we do to change that. And so I don't have the answer on the other end. Like I hear you and I get that. And I understand that you may feel as though you have to navigate the world a certain way. And there's probably a lot of truth to your story. It's backed up
100%.
And it's validated. But as a man, I put it much more on the men in our society or people in power in a bunch of different other ways. Like, what are we doing? Let's use homosexuality and pride. Like we just had a football player say that, hey, I'm going to let you into what I'm going through and who I am. Like, are we saying, hey, good for you, way to be courageous, way to put yourself out there?
Absolutely.
Are we saying, hey, this is 2021, we don't need to discuss this anymore, right? And so those are examples of when someone is willing to have this unshakable belief in themselves and society is saying, no, we don't need to. What can we do to say, no, bring it up. Let's bring it forward. And I hope that came across in that chapter, because it was something that I was very aware of, is that for many people, when they step into their arrogance, they get shut down, pushed back, and it becomes detrimental to them progressing in our society. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's absolutely something that people in power need to be aware of and need to try to hold themselves back from shutting down.
Brian, great. This has been a great conversation. Yes, and yes to all of that.
This is why we do what we do.
Yes. And so, and this is the last thing that I want to walk away here with is, ultimately, the book is saying what we talk about here at PeacePlayers, that inside-outside transformation, right? Using a clear lens to see the world, but first going inside and looking at ourselves and seeing how we contributed to conflict, and then making sure that we see others in their humanity and approach them with kindness and peace and love. And so I guess my question is, for all our wonderful peace players out there, what would be one takeaway that you would want to leave them with in terms of just that shift, that mental shift, that strength that we've been talking about, that wellness, that health that we've been talking about all day today?
Yeah. So Emmett hit on it earlier, this idea of selfishness and selflessness. And
Okay.
we have to take care of ourselves first and fill our cup if we want to serve other people. And I would say not just for your youth, but also for your staff, because in the nonprofit world, we see burnout all the time.
Mhm.
And we see people that get into it because they want to make an impact and a difference in the world, but then they serve everybody else and they forget to serve themselves. And so the idea of selfishness is just fill your cup up and then give the overflow and the reserves to the other people. And let's not forget to serve. Like, selflessness is key to teams. It's key to nonprofits. It's key to business. Like, can we be part of something bigger than ourselves? So for people listening to this, if there's a shift that I'd bring their attention to, it's, hey, you got to make sure you're good if you want to pour in other people. And I've been grateful that a lot of our pro athletes are starting to say, hey, I'm not good, I need help. And they're raising their hand. And we need more of that, because the reality is mental illness doesn't discriminate based on race, sexuality, or gender. Like, we all are capable of not being okay. And we need to be able to take care of ourselves before we can take care of anybody else. So I think as many of the youth are in conflict, they need to make sure they're good before they try to reach their hand across the other end of the aisle, so to speak, and try to serve other people.
Well, there you have it. That's
that drop the mic
drop the
moment.
mic moments right there for you. Fill your cup up, and when it overflows, do the same for others, and do it with peace and love.
Ryan, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Very, very good. You know that good conversation that you're looking forward to every single day, and you have it? This was it.
You know that conversation, Chinny, where you have to like lie down on the bed and look up at the ceiling afterwards, think about everything? That's one of these.
Well,
just take it all in.
I just want to thank you all for taking this on, and I think there's so much good and impact that PeacePlayers can have on the world. And you know, I don't talk about peace and love in the book, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be. I sort of have personal values and professional values, and for me, I tried to blend those early in my career. That was Teach for America, was the blending of the personal and professional. I ended up going a different path, and my professional values can be different than my personal values, but PeacePlayers absolutely tugs at my personal values. And I really believe at the end of the day, like, are you a good person? Are you serving something bigger than yourself? Are you moving us better than where we were before? And I think character is just the most important thing. And like, I don't consider myself to be a character coach. I don't consider myself to be a love coach or a peace coach, but I think those are the most essential things. And as human beings, we all need to be thinking about how we can make this world better. And PeacePlayers, I know for a fact, is doing that. So thank you all for all that you're doing. And I can't wait to see you all in person, and you can make fun of my jump shot and put in a post and just go to work on me.
So Ryan, where can people follow what you're doing, where you are, and also where can they get the book if they want to read it?
Yeah, the two places I play on social media are LinkedIn and Twitter at Brian Levenson. And then the book, it's called Shift Your Mind, as Chinny's sharing with everybody. You can get that anywhere books are sold. Amazon's usually the easiest place. And then our website is strongskills.co. And I am very much amendable to talking over email, Brian at strongskills.co. And would love to chat with anybody who's interested. And I can hear my kids pitter pattering. So I think it's time for me to run, but I really appreciate all that you all do. And thanks for having me. I'm really honored and grateful to be here.
Thank you so much.
Coming,
we
Brian.
appreciate you.
Thank
you. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening and joining us on this amazing journey. If you like what you heard, we encourage you to like and subscribe. We've got many more brilliant conversations and stories to come in the weeks ahead. Please also share with a friend. Emmett, what do you have to add?
Oh my God, I am shook. That was incredible. I'm so glad Brian was on. Thank you,
Yeah,
Chinny. You can
absolutely.
learn more about PeacePlayers by visiting our website at www.peaceplayers.org and following us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at PeacePlayers International, Tumblr, MySpace. Just kidding. Never on
LinkedIn.
Tumblr or MySpace. Oh, and LinkedIn, of course. But that's about it.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go lay down and really stare at the wall this time. I got a lot to unpack in this episode.
And that's it. He's going to lay down, folks. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Like, are you really putting out?